Welcome to White Guys for Kamala. I'm your host, John Ennis. My co-host is Morley. Our guest this week is political activist Sarah Kate Levy, whom I donated to when she ran for city council. And I believe we're also part of the same PAC, Fund Her.
Yep. I do
which
a lot of work
supports
with Fund Her. Yep.
which supports progressive women running at the state level and has proven to be very impactful in a short period of time. And so I'm glad you could join us, and I look forward to hearing about how about your experience. You were just in Arizona knocking on doors for Kamala Harris. How was that?
Well, it was hot. I mean, it was very, 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 very hot. It was interesting because I have not spent a lot of time in Phoenix. It's nothing like Los Angeles. It's just a very spread out city with no like real placemaking. So it was sort of hard to know, like, I don't understand really where we're walking. I don't really understand the impact of this neighborhood on the rest of it, but it was fine. I decided to go through the Arizona Democrats. There's lots of different PACs and different groups going out there. But I sort of felt like I wanted to go out on Kamala's message, which would be coordinated with the Democrats. So I signed up through them and I went out with my sister, and they were still doing low propensity voters last week. So these are people that they have called 4 or 5 times who sort of made them feel like there was a simpatico value system. They weren't all Democrats. A lot of them were Republicans, Greens, uncommitteds, independents, American independents, which is not the same thing. That's basically Nazis, but people choose the wrong box all the time. So we got walk packets that were like 35 or 40 houses each, and we went out in the 110-degree heat. And what was interesting about these precincts were because these people have been talked to so many times, people did not want to open the doors. Like there were places where you'd get to like, you knew the house was empty, there wasn't a car, the dog was barking, no one was coming. It was like, okay, this person's not home. And then you'd get to the place where like the dog would bark and the person would come past the window and then they wouldn't open the door. So I would say like half of the doors we hit, no one was home. Half of the doors that answered were people who were just like, there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans. She's just as bad as he is. You cannot convince me otherwise. There is no story you can tell that will move me. And I was like, okay, well, this is why you're a low propensity voter. And then, there were other doors where like somebody under 30 would race to the door, open it, tell me before I said anything, yes, I'm voting all the way down Democrat. Don't worry, we got this. And I was like, okay, the young people will save us.
Quick question for you. Do you feel like, because I'm sure that the Republicans are getting tons and tons of the same emails and text messages that we are, but do you think that they're getting the door knockers and the phone
No,
calls and the
no.
postcards and stuff?
I think they're probably getting the texts and the emails. But I mean, we are all reading the same press. So, the RNC farmed out all the ground game to outside PACs, and Elon Musk is doing a lot of it. And according to The Guardian today, it's paid volunteers doing most of the work. Well, paid volunteers, paid walkers. And a paid walker doesn't do the work. Like a paid walker is like, great, I'll drop the lid, I'll go. So I think that I have two thoughts. I think we're beating them on the ground game, but I wonder if the ground game even matters to a Trump mega Republican.
Yeah. But I guess because for me, it's always been like this idea that like Republicans, their primary interest is voter suppression. Democrats, their primary interest is spreading out as many non-voters and getting them to vote as possible. And which always to me was like, doesn't that tell you the whole story right there? That like
Yeah.
all the Republicans need to do is make sure that people don't vote, except for the people that they can count on will always vote, that they don't even really need to reach out too much, you know? And I know that with this election, it's become a little bit different. It's become a little bit more Trump reaching out to people who are kind of like new voters, or that he can sort of frame himself as being the change candidate. And so I guess it's curious to me. Even like when I heard Elon Musk say, get people to vote, register to vote, I was like, I'm so not used to hearing that from a
Yeah,
Republican. I'm used to hearing that from Democrats. I'm used to hearing about how Republicans have, filed some sort of motion, or they're like, trying to, convince people to, watch the polls and make sure that the wrong people aren't voting or whatever. And so for me, I guess it's interesting to sort of think about how much work we as Democrats put into outreach, and you just don't see that. At least I feel like I haven't seen that on the Republican side. But it
yeah.
seems like that it's not exactly the case with this election. It's a little bit different. I mean, as
I think
far as
they're
from what I've read.
talking about actually voting in a different way than they did last time. Last time it was early voting is a scam, just go on election day. And I think that Trump was the only person who believed that. Everyone around him was like, no, 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 get your early votes in.
Right.
And I think that they're getting to say that out loud now because he's less in control of the machine around him. Like from what I can tell, they're all speaking their own minds in a way that they did not used to.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks for that update. It's good to hear because, it's so easy for other people to sit back and stress. And that's been a lot of coverage and a lot of the discourse on Threads, by the way, which has kind of been going downhill as a platform. Just completely separately, I posted a joke. I was walking my dog at the sunset last night, and I took a pretty picture of the sun going down over the hills and, the nice empty street. And I
Yeah.
said, what a hellhole. How can anyone live in Los Angeles? And it's gotten like 600 likes or something, but almost 200 comments from people yelling at me, telling me to leave LA if I don't like it, or arguing with me or saying why, it's such a terrible state. And I was like, it's a sunset photo. Like it's so clear. It's like a tourist photo. I don't understand why that's so hard. And
Yeah.
the fact that it's the current for such aggro now, that platform. And I'm like, wow, people they just need to lighten up. And I think I'm gonna probably not be on here for much longer.
But I think that's also a symptom of like our post-Trump years. Like I do not remember public discourse being like this before 2016.
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
remember the crazies on Twitter being so angry, like it was a game. And I feel like it's all been gamified in this weird, angry, like even my husband, who's a good Democrat, watches Fox News all day, makes himself insane, and then gets on social media and fights with people in this weird, aggro way where I'm like, you're fighting with robots. What are you doing? But I think he's just amped up the discourse in a way that even like I get really, really pissy online. And then I'm like, why am I fighting with this guy? Why don't I just block this guy? What's wrong with me?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, maybe last time or another, but for me, it's so hard when I will see a comment board and I don't, and I've tried my best to just completely ignore it, because the thing I've gone there to see is the post itself, not the comments about it. But for some reason, I'm drawn to it in a way that I can't completely understand. And oftentimes I will get so disheartened by it, and I have to remind myself 10,000 comments on a video or a post or whatever, that's not actually, like, we're talking about 50 million people, you know what I mean? Like, or like a lot of people that are voting, and actually 10,000 people, you could just get 10,000 crazies that are, or just 10,000 people who have no sense of irony or no sense of sarcasm or no sense of sanity. And, if all of those people are commenting, that still is not, it's not an accurate depiction of our country, you know?
Yeah, I
And
think
and
that's
that
right.
that's the only place I can find any kind of solace, is the idea that, like, well, those the loudest people aren't exactly everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that sort of pivots to the polls that we're seeing also, because like I haven't gotten asked a question from a pollster this cycle, but I also don't answer a number I don't know.
Right.
Right,
Yeah. No. And I,
exactly.
I was all of the young people. I'm thinking of, like, has there ever been an 18-year-old kid who wants to spend time talking to a pollster? You know?
Right. So like they're missing the kids, they're missing us, they're getting old people at home who have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
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 But at the same time, though, I feel like it still seems crazy to me that even just looking, if you look at like the vote tally last time, that like it should have been a blowout to me, it seems like, because, but you drive by, I just, I'm always telling people, or at least I was before, I was like, is there a single person who did not vote for Donald Trump last time who's like, but this time I'm changing my mind? And it's like, psychotically, yes. The answer to
Yeah,
that question is yes. And it doesn't make
it
any
is.
sense to me.
That's what's scary. That's what's scary in the conversation right now. It's like psychotically, yes, there are people who are traditionally part of the Democratic umbrella who are going the other way. And it's like, have we done such a bad job taking care of our own that they're like, well, there's a better option with this crazy person? And apparently that's right.
Right. This
Well,
crazy person who we already gave a chance to and failed
Right.
yeah.
We know what will
spectacularly.
happen. We've seen
Yeah.
it already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I think there's been something about Trump, and I'm sure there'll be studies about this in the future, but he seems to really sort of activate mental illness in people who are already like sort of on the verge of things. And so there's been such an interesting, correlation between people who are already sort of disturbed and alienated, who picked up the banner for Trump and just, won't talk about things that make sense so much. But like you said, it's all about focusing on that anger. And so when you're losing people to that side, there's something where they're like, you know what? I'm just gonna be mad now. I'm just gonna try to come up with things and say like, go Brandon, and 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 this kind of like it's like they're energized because of that, and it's a magnet for conspiracy theorists
Right.
and people who are so alienated and angry. And we had an episode with a guy, Mark Green, the author of Remaking Manhood, and he spoke very eloquently about the man box and how what it's like growing up as a male and how we're primed from early on to suppress emotion, to uh, be competitive and push down others to try to show strength, and how by the time you're middle age, you don't have friends, your health is not going well. If you've bought into the idea that, America's here for you and you're the white guys, you're automatically going to be the leadership positions, it's dawning on you that that wasn't true. And so it makes it very easy for these kinds of alienated men to be the ones who are going to glob on to some, like, a weak person's idea of a strong person, a poor person's idea of a rich person, and an unmanly person's idea of a manly person. And so,
Yeah.
um, it's that kind of alienation, I think, is part of what's been driving actual Republicans away. I think we're going to have to start determining, describing people as MAGA Republican, Democrats,
Yeah.
independents, because there's so many established Republicans that are pushing away. And like Geraldo Rivera wrote some long piece today about how he's supporting Kamala Harris, and I was like, what? Alberto Gonzalez is supporting
Yeah.
Kamala Harris. It gives cover to so many other Republicans who are like, okay, it's not just me. You know, this is,
Yeah.
the peeling away is like, I've never seen that in my adult life. And that's not cool to betray your party like that. That's big waves. And so, the fact that it keeps happening is pretty remarkable. And I think it
Yeah.
portends like a larger culture shift.
I think so too. I think if Trump loses this cycle, he has already bankrupted the RNC.
Yes.
And at that point, it fizzles and dies, I think. And either something comes out of the ashes that is still called Republicans, or it's a whole brand new thing, and we're living through something that is so deep in our history, no one can grapple with it. In the same way that like people couldn't grapple with Kamala just getting all the votes before the convention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just okay, we'll just do that again. But I think there's sort of the answer to this alienated man who's becoming the like crazy Trumper is the fact that there are all these women who are on all these lists in houses where their men are not on the list. Like I had houses where I only had women on the list who were low propensity, but they were Democrats. And I get to the door and the husband would answer and he's not on my list. And there was one house where I got there and I asked for the wife. The man came to the door, started screaming at me. No soliciting, no soliciting. I was like, actually, funnily enough, politics is not soliciting. I'm allowed to stand here. So I was just like, can I speak to your wife? No, she can't come to the door. We're voting for Trump. And I thought, is that really true? And how many men who think that have wives who are going to vote for Kamala quietly, secretly, and at the ballot box? And
Yeah.
one hopes. One
Yeah.
hopes.
Well, there was a really effective ad that was just put out, I think today or yesterday about that, showing a woman going with her husband to a polling place, and she shares looks with other women who are walking out, and she sees a mom with her kids on her way there, and it's all about what's going on in her head. And the guy's wearing a red hat, nothing in front, but
Right.
it's a red hat, and it's pretty potent, and I think JD Vance has done a good job of alienating women, probably even more than Trump has this time around.
He's so much worse than Trump on that score. I
Yeah,
think there's some people who really are drawn to Trump because they see him as a powerful figure, and you cannot see JD Vance as a powerful figure.
right,
He's just that
right.
slime ball you always hated.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like nothing you can remember that guy in your middle school, and then in your high school, and then in your dorm in college, and he's the same guy. It's like no one wants to talk to him, no one wants to be friends with him. Something's a little off.
Yeah,
That's who's
yeah.
running as the running mate. It's so crazy that they picked that guy
And he's wearing eyeliner the whole time. It's
the
one
whole
thing,
time.
it's one thing to be putting down women. It's another thing to be, stealing their makeup tips while you do it.
Yeah, yeah.
This week I wanted to talk about being judgmental and what that means, and uh why, it the consequences of being overly and harshly judgmental. Um it usually means, sort of negatively putting someone down for having different beliefs or not behaving in a certain way. And I think it's very common, especially on the right, not exclusive to the right, the idea that um, when you're politically inspired or motivated, you get that rush or superiority by telling other people they're wrong. And it's certainly something that a lot of religious people will take to heart as well. Again, not all religious types, but something that I learned about being judgmental is, and this is what I learned through therapy, and this is in a non-political sort of context. You drive in LA, and I have a kid, and I'd get very worried about traffic. Okay, I'd get worried about bad drivers, huge trucks, people not paying attention, people merging without even looking or turning on their lights, and I would just be mad all the time because I'm like, you're not being safe. I know someone who lost their kids in an accident tragically, and this has been weighing over me for years since, and so I'm hyper vigilant about this stuff. And I eventually realized that that's a form of being judgmental of other people's driving. And I have an expectation I'm placing on them to, well, you're supposed to be driving safely for my benefit and everyone else's, and you're supposed to be doing the right thing. And really, they're just trying to get to their destination just like everyone else. They're not thinking of me. They're not thinking of my kid. They're not thinking about the people behind them. And I'm making myself unhappy being judgmental because I realize that, you know, no one's going to live up to my standards, no one's, that's the whole thing, is that like I've placed myself above people as trying to be this, superior driver, and all you are surrounded by people who are not observing that. So when you see someone like, say, the Elitos, who are bitter, vindictive, miserable people who obsess over flags and are willing to overthrow the government, it's not just that that's his title, is it a judge? Like he and his wife, Martha Ann, are really big on judging other people, and they're miserable and they hate it. She said she couldn't stand looking at a gay pride flag across the lake at someone else's house, and so she wanted to come up with her own flag just to piss them off. And it's like, this is
Crazy.
so far gone and so self-righteous, and it's this, a continuing um sort of paradox of making yourself more and more miserable. And so, while I realize that being judgmental is something where you might hurt other people and it might lead to having fewer friends and you might decrease the diversity of your social network, really you end up spending more effort judging others than working towards your goal. And so you become
Yeah.
sort of a prisoner to being judgmental.
I think that the problem is that people think that being judgmental is somehow not only it is the goal essentially. It's somehow that is accomplishing something. That the idea of I've attacked somebody for their belief system, that is enough to feel like I have accomplished something. And the sad truth is that they kind of have, in that they disheartened someone who was excited about something or was, at least enough to share it or to express it openly. And I find that, to me, I feel like I mean, obviously I've experienced it from the right a lot more than from the left, but I think, looking at it from as an unbiased perspective as I can, I think it's a problem that the left shares just as much as the right. I mean, in terms of certainly the level of self-righteousness. I mean, certainly I've seen this, a lot since the war in Israel and Palestine, and that situation has come up, because obviously it's this idea of I can find something that makes me morally bulletproof. No matter what you say to me, I will always be morally correct because I am on the side of, and honestly, you could apply that to either side. You could say
Yeah.
I'm on the side that hates terrorists, and you could say I'm on the side that hates genocide. And it's like both become this brick wall that you just cannot have any kind of conversation with. You can't, and most people are afraid, myself included, are afraid to even, try and reach any kind of understanding, because that the consequences of being wrong are being a person who is in favor of genocide or a person who's in favor of terrorism or whatever. And so it feels to me like it's this kind of pestilence that has taken over every level of discourse, especially online, because it removes any kind of humanity in terms of, I'm not afraid to call somebody a Nazi when I don't have to look at them in the face and say it. I'm not afraid of, and that's where you get like, it then just extends into death threats. It starts with judgment and it ends with these horrible, horrible things. I mean, even in terms of, I remember going back to, like, remember that girl Rebecca Black and her song Friday, and how immediately, like, she, it wasn't bad enough that you didn't like the song. You had to tell her she should kill herself. And you
Yeah.
just think, like, what is wrong with people that is where they go to in their brain? It starts at judgment and it ends. It goes so rapidly into this insane direction, and I just feel like, for me, maybe the answer is certainly less engagement with that kind of a thing, but I guess I feel like the answer is probably just less time online and trying to engage more in face-to-face situations. But I think the sad thing is, it's become this situation where people don't want to express how they feel about anything because of the sense of retribution, of the sense of, consequence that comes with forming an opinion at all. I don't know. I feel like, of all the things that we've talked about in terms of, the sort of toxic, ramifications of things like, whether it's masculinity or whether it's, entitlement, or whether it's, humility, or all these different things that we've touched on over the last few weeks. I feel like judgment is the one that probably does the most, like, damage that you can kind of see clearly, because everybody feels judged and everybody's terrified of being judged, except for the people who are excited to do the judging, you know?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think what you said before is engaging less in this sort of fake social world and engaging more in real life is the message that those of us who are trying so hard to win this election have to deliver to our friends who are afraid to volunteer. Because they're worried that this discourse that comes online is what they're going to hit on the phone or at a door. But people don't talk like that in general at the door. People can say crazy stuff and you don't have to respond in a crazy way, because your job at the door or on the phone is to find a point of empathy and win them over. And most people, if they scream at you on the phone and then they hang up, that conversation's over. You let it go, you go to the next one. And you're not in a 25-hour battle of wits on threads or whatever Twitter is called now. You're not doing that. You just move on and move on and move on and move on, but you can actually have a good conversation. I wasted 30 minutes talking to a guy who was telling me that everything in America was wrong. It was fascinating. I was trying so hard to find a point of commonality. And I mean, I did walk away judging him because at the end of the conversation, he said, well, I'm moving to Turkey anyway. And I thought, oh, you just want a strongman government anyway. Whatever. Fine. You're crazy. But during the conversation, I wasn't judging him. And
Yeah,
that's sort of the
yeah,
message I really feel like has to be delivered. Like we're having
absolutely.
good conversations, and it's
Yeah.
not like this toxic wasteland on social media.
Yeah, I think you're right. So looking at Kamala's campaign this week, she got a lot of news for this line that I'll show you right now.
He is unwilling to meet for a second debate. And here's the thing, it makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on? So folks, for these reasons and so many more, it is time to turn the page. It is time to turn the page because America is ready to chart a new way forward, ready for a new and optimistic generation of leadership, which is why Democrats, Independents, and Republicans are supporting our campaign. Because they and we know we need a president who works for all the American people. And that has been the story of my entire career. I have only ever had one client, the people. As a young courtroom prosecutor, I stood up for women and children against predators. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks and delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by the big for-profit colleges. I've stood up for workers being cheated out of the wages they were due. Stood up for seniors facing elder abuse. And as president, it is my pledge to you that I will always fight for all the American people.
I thought that was some pretty good pirouetting from pointing out the deficiencies of Trump to pointing to her own record. And if you've been watching these rallies, you can start to say some of it with a lot. You can say the lines with her about, when she gets into, I've always had only one client and from
Right.
then on. But of course, like, like you're saying, you have to keep repeating this stuff because people who are just tuning in or they've blocked it out or they're low propensity. And so any one of these appearances could be the first time they hear this stuff. And so,
Yeah.
it was good to get the jab in on Trump because that's like a kick to the nuts to him, and that'll I'm sure they had to restrain him when he heard that because he really is that unstable. And we're finally it's been weird after all this time to see the media actually start to point out his deficiencies, to actually start to acknowledge the themes of fascism and human extermination in his speeches. CNN today had a graphic on where they were showing the bottom part, it's talking about like the themes of racism in his speech with a picture of a dictionary definition of fascism. So it's both terrifying and relieving at the same time, that it's actually getting this sort of like front page response and that reporters aren't jerking around anymore and they're like, okay, you really flipped the switch. So I think this is this sort of it's not quite the closing message, but as it is it's in the home stretch. I think it's really effective and far more inclusive and inspiring for people than, let's hate on trans kids.
I mean, yeah. Although I do wonder, like, we see that he's failing, we see that he's unstable. I personally don't think that's as effective a message as here are the things I can do for you.
Exactly.
Because I do not think that the other side cares how unstable he is. The other side sees this as a team. They're not excited about him as a candidate in the same way that, like, every woman I know watches her on TV and cries. And it's different than it was with Hillary.
How
I love
so?
Hillary. I grew up always, I mean, I was like, I am all in for Hillary. Let us do this. But I do not remember watching a debate, cheering at the television, clapping, crying, telling the kids to shut up like this. Like she was so good at that debate. I do not remember getting like that for Hillary.
Yeah.
This just
Mm,
seems new. She's really special, this woman.
Yeah. And I think it has to do, they're different generations, so she's, comes across a lot more um frankly, Kamala.
Yeah,
And
she comes across as one of us.
yeah, yeah, as Gen
it's
X, that's
true.
right. So I moving on to debunking time. This is another part where we try to clear the air on things that are being misconstrued. And so this week I want to talk about how the government does not cause hurricanes, contrary to what some people have been saying online, such as elected Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's a couple of her tweets saying climate change is the new COVID. Ask your government if the weather is manipulated or controlled. Did you ever give permission to them to do it? Are you paying for it? Of course you are. And then another tweet, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. And so this gave other people the opening to start to question, the the idea that there's hurricanes that are being created for political gain by the Democrats only twice a year for some reason. So to clear this up, here's an article in USA Today. No, the government didn't create the hurricanes. President Biden addresses MTG conspiracy. And for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I found this video that might be a little bit more informative, explaining what hurricanes are.
Hurricanes. A hurricane is a huge storm with powerful winds and lots of rain. They can be up to 600 miles across and make a spiraling shape like this. Hurricanes are formed over water in tropical areas, and they use warm water as energy. They can move 10 to 20 miles per hour across the ocean. Most hurricanes happen entirely over water, and they aren't dangerous to us. But when a hurricane gets close to land, they can cause a lot of damage. Their winds can be up to 200 miles per hour, and they can knock over trees, power lines, and buildings. They can also cause tornadoes, thunder and lightning, big waves, and flooding. The hole in the center of a hurricane is called the eye.
So, did you learn anything from that you didn't already know about
Well, I
hurricanes?
know I didn't give the hurricane permission, so and I
Well, yeah.
didn't pay for it. I mean, I shouldn't have had to at least.
There's
Well,
so many questions. It's like if we could control the weather, why would we do any of the things she's saying we're doing?
Yeah.
Like,
No,
would we need bombs if we could control the weather? Like none of this makes sense in any way.
we would have stopped climate change and we wouldn't
I
be
mean,
bugging people about it.
seriously.
Yeah. We would,
well,
yeah, we would
I think
sit
it
that
also
long time
goes
ago.
to show you that, and we talked about this, a little bit last time, this idea that conspiracy theories, to my mind, are actually a strain for some sense of control in an out of control world. The idea that, like, to someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the idea that, like, it's not God controlling, like, it's not God sending something, and it's also not the government. It's actually more uncontrollable. You can't behave the right way and not, give gay people the permission to marry and somehow stop a hurricane from happening. You can't elect a person and stop a hurricane from happening. Like they just happen. Tragedy just happens, and it doesn't. It is there's a chaos to it that I think most people are terrified by. So they decide instead to, fixate on some sort of idea that can be controlled because you can vote all the right people into office and you can take away the right to marry, and that can somehow protect you from these things. And I just wonder, what are the people that actually experience these things, how do they actually feel about them when they read something like that or they see something like that and they think this isn't a joke? I mean, maybe they're crazy, and I mean, obviously you read about the FEMA situation where they're getting threats, and that's terrifying. But I mean, most people that I think are genuinely affected by these things, they I would imagine find it very insulting, this idea that you can take their tragedy as a political football.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. And I think that like Sarah was saying, that these are the people who are holding their nose, voting for their side. And I think that legitimately, I think it is probably peeling some people away, being like, I don't know that I want to be associated with this level of crazy, because I know that this happens every year and it's been getting worse, and we're pretty used to it now. What I could use if I'm in Florida is someone to help me afford home insurance for when these things happen, because there's
right,
now a huge insurance crisis in Florida because
right.
DeSantis probably thinks getting affordable home insurance is woke. So people are suffering and their needs aren't being met. And this is, pretty existential stuff.
It is, and it raises this question of like, okay, there are people who legitimately fall prey to out of bounds conspiracies, but does Marjorie Taylor Greene actually believe the bullshit she spouts? Because I do not think she actually believes the bullshit she spouts. I think she has weaponized this crazy language for a purpose I cannot quite understand, because she's no closer to Trump than she was. She's not Laura Loomer. Like, I
Right.
don't like.
Yeah.
But that's what I find so like just it's crazy to me because I cannot see the purpose of it. Like
Yeah.
you
Because
cannot
then
tell,
she has to defend it then. Yeah.
yeah, you cannot tell tens of thousands of people who have lost their homes and are still sitting in the dark and will never rebuild their lives that this was done to them on purpose by the government.
Yeah. It's dangerous stuff. And yet moving on to this week in men making men look bad. I'm going to show a clip of Harrison Butker, and this sort of talking down to people is becoming more and more of a go-to of the Republican Party in this election, and particularly to women. So this was a clip of him doing an appearance with Senator Josh Hawley.
Society, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing shameful if you are a woman and you want to spend time with your family and raise your children. So it's not putting down anyone who maybe wants to go get a great education and have a career, but it's more talking about how beautiful it is for women to maybe just step aside and prioritize their family and spend time with their children and raise their family. And that's what I was just trying to speak love.
Yeah, the idea that you have to step aside from politics is what he's saying, and that's pretty clear. You can do all the other things and still vote and still be involved in local civics. I don't understand why there's this either or that he's trying to, say maybe don't worry your pretty little head about these things. But it's so appalling and disheartening to see, frankly.
I mean, it's one of those things that it just leaves me completely stunned that we're still having these conversations. That like we have a vice presidential candidate walking around married to this high-powered lawyer who is talking about how women should stay home and raise their families. Melania's making whatever bank she's making off all of her products. I don't know what kind of like incredible mothering skills she has. So the centering of like this mother as this idea is just it's appalling. And it's appalling because like young people aren't getting married. Millennials are not getting married. They're not having the same families. I think that's why Kamala is interesting to people. Because she's like, we're not in the 1950s. We do have these different arrangements in our lives. People are choosing to have babies or have cats. Like it's shocking to me that they think that's a winning message.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that they think it's going to be winning, and you've got actual Republican women being like, "Don't demonize IVF. My God, what are you doing?" And
Right.
so when we talk about like the polls, and you're going to keep getting these, updates every day saying it's a horse race, even though it's actually been pretty unchanged for months, and Kamala on average is ahead by like 2 or 3 points in every poll. It's just really a kind of a joke at this point that they keep trying to say it's like, oh, but this is one, no, this is changing what, you know, um, the I saw one, you know, you go back to when the term soccer mom came up in politics, and I believe that was in the Dole Clinton race. And that was the first time you're like soccer moms, like when they were talking about how soccer moms are going to decide the race, and it's basically another word for suburban women, but
Right.
moms. And but at the time you're like, what about little league moms? What about like hockey moms or any other sport or other parents? Like it just seems such a joke. Now there's like, it's such a joke in itself. But uh the suburban woman vote is like, you know, um 2-1 for Kamala in this election. I mean, that's kind of game over when I saw that, because I was like, that was always a thing, was how they were going to split. And they were just so couldn't make up their mind about Hillary even back then. And so when you see that, you're like, isn't that the whole fucking game right there?
Yeah,
Isn't
the
isn't
game
the
is the
fucking
mom.
suburban woman the whole fucking
Right.
game in the American elections? Like, if you're already there, dude, if you lost them, like, no wonder you're leaning on trans panic in your like
Right.
closing statements.
And it is true that like it is the moms. The women are in this country are now better educated than the men. They have more 4-year degrees. They have more graduate degrees. The women in this country are voting for her, which is amazing considering they didn't vote for Hillary.
Yeah,
So the women in this country are voting for her, and the little woman at home may still be voting for her.
yeah,
And it's fascinating to me because I think that on the Republican side, they are used to the men as the head of the household tell everyone how to vote. But on the Democratic side, I don't know a lot of men who tell their women how the ballot goes. A lot of the time, it's the women saying, I researched the propositions, I know who the judges are, you know your other choices because they're famous people, but here's the list of the rest of it and vote that way.
yeah.
Like that's what happens on our side.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, LA Times, what did they say?
Right. But
Okay.
it's like, I really,
Yeah.
there's no, it's just shocking to me that these men think they'll all do what they want. Because I
Yeah.
don't think they're gonna this time.
No, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. And to that point, here's a going back to Harrison Butker. I'm just playing this without comment. Um, a radio host, John Arthur Hill, made a TikTok commenting on Harrison Butker, and because he is a fashionista, and so again, just showing this without comment. But I thought it was interesting.
My inspiration was the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I really love Maggie Smith, and I really just wanted to pay an homage to her in between games. Bitch, I'm serving you cankle. My ankles are my best freaking feature. How else do you think I am kicking these balls and making these goals with if I didn't have freaking ankles of steel? I love a head to toe plaid, and I really wanted to pose with the worm from Dune. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you over the sound of my fierceness. Look at this freaking cream ass bag. It's my wife's favorite bag. Yes, my wife, it's her favorite bag, and she is in the kitchen currently making me dinner, which is where all of you should be right now too. This is one of my favorite outfits that I ever wore. I wore this actually to the Incel convention, 2019. My grandma actually bequeathed this top to me, and it used to be her tablecloth, and my grandma and I were just like super close, and now it's my a gorgeous little jacket. Game day! I really love this outfit. This like really brought out the highlights that I had in my hair, or maybe it was lowlights. I don't even remember. My wife does them. I wore this actually twice in a row. Don't judge me. And this one in particular, I had just had heterosexual sex with my wife. And then she cooked me dinner. I miss this bag. I can't find it.
So again, sharing that without comment, but there when I see as a man people more than I've spoken about this before, the guys who go out of their way to be especially manly in your presence, unprompted. that in a way that's anti-woman or objectifying, and you just get the feeling where it feels just a little forced. They're trying a little too hard and it sort of comes out of nowhere. And even in this clip, I'll go back to this clip. I just can't help but notice just how white Harrison Butker's teeth are, even compared to Josh Hawley. And so, credit is due, of course, for any man who is takes care of himself. But, not every guy has the well-groomed beard game that Harrison Butker does either. So that was just one thing I wanted to share because it just sort of happened to be on the internet. That's all.
Yeah,
That's
but
all I'm saying.
what I saw in that was he kept wearing a mask. Like, what is the disconnect? You believe COVID is real, but you're gonna back this guy who killed 3 million people because he kept telling us COVID wasn't a big deal. So that's what I saw. I saw this very metrosexual football player wearing a mask.
Yeah,
Yep.
telling. Um, uh, Now, this week in Don't Be This Guy, I'll share this clip. Don't be this guy. In this case, don't be stranded after a Trump rally. This was in Coachella. Look at this.
Also known as Fire Festival.
Also known as Fire Festival.
I mean, are these people still going to vote for him? He abandoned them all in the desert. Are they still really going to vote for him?
The only thing I can think about when I see this kind of a thing is just the knowledge that these people are just waiting for a reason to blame somebody else for it because they're like, please. I mean, it can't possibly be that he refused to pay for the buses because he doesn't give a shit about us, that, we're just, livestock to him. They have to, wait for someone to tell them, oh, it was because of this and this and this. It's not Donald Trump's fault. And they'll be like, got it. Yes, that's
Yeah, wait,
okay.
wait. Listen to this part here.
Going west and then going east again, and then going west, and it's an absolute madness. Somebody did something, and we need to get to the bottom of this. Someone needs to investigate this now. Everyone here is stranded. Everyone here is stranded. We're all stranded here. The parking lot is a 2-hour walk. Incredible. Excuse me, sorry.
And so I have to say, don't be that guy, because that guy is surprised that Trump did what he did in 2020, which was the exact same thing at the exact same time in the election, which one of the headlines right here: hundreds of Trump supporters stuck on freezing cold Omaha airfield after rally, 7 taken to hospitals. Another one, an article: Trump supporters at rallies continued to get stranded in chilly temperatures in Nebraska, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. I thought that would have been like the breakup moment for Trump supporters to be like, wow, he really doesn't care about us, and especially in light of this, when they're talking about, hurricanes and who's going to take care of you in a hurricane. This guy can't even get you to a fucking parking lot.
Right.
It's just so sad, except they're just sitting there waiting to be told what to do, wanting to blame someone. And it's like, dude, he didn't want to pay for the buses back. That's what happened last time. He's
Exactly.
broke.
Yeah. Yeah. And he didn't pay the operator. He didn't pay the operator. So why he's doing rallies outside of all these big venues, outside of all these big markets, because all the venues in the big markets got screwed last time.
That's right.
And that's, this is in the press. This is easy to Google. This is not hard to find.
Yeah. It's it shows it is metaphor on top of metaphors of being stranded, taken for granted. He doesn't care about you. He only cares if you're there for the cameras. He doesn't care if you're frozen. You're not getting any health care benefits from him by going to the hospital afterwards. It's it's pretty desperate.
To me, I just don't understand how how people like that can be so, fool me once, shame. It's like fool me as many times as you want, because ultimately I'm just waiting for you to tell me how to feel about this. Like I'm waiting for you to say, oh, it was actually Kamala's fault because she paid off the people. It's all a conspiracy theory. She's trying to, she wants to kill all of you people. She wants you all to die in the desert. And so she paid off the bus drivers. And the people are like, yep, that is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. And I fully hate her even more now. And it's like, at this point, we are at a point, I mean, I thought we would be done with this nonsense last time, in the last election after this. I mean, a lot of people talk about this idea of, oh, the two-party system is so flawed. But, you guys were talking earlier about how the Republican Party, if they lose this election, really is kind of over with, because they've done everything they can to kind of, they've destroyed their own party by obliterating whatever they once claimed to care about. And so maybe the answer to the two-party issue is, well, guess what? If you, vote Democrat, and maybe the Republicans will have to completely reinvent themselves, and it'll be a different two-party system with slightly different ideals or whatever, because now you've got one of the parties that's essentially taken everything they claim to hold dear and abandoned it in favor of lies and fabulizing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this our white guy of the week. This is actually kind of an unusual one, but I came across the clip and I felt like we had to include him in Kamala's media barrage this week. She sat down with Howard Stern, and Howard Stern has certainly grown a lot over the years from the shock jock personality, but and he's a really good interviewer. Actually, he's insanely good. But this one clip of him talking to her, I was just like, wow, Howard, right on. So I just want to show this quick clip in the middle of the.
Right.
It's just good people.
Do you think there are people who will not vote for a woman because she's a woman? I mean, I think you're up against that, which just, my best associations in radio and in business have been collaborating with women.
Yeah.
Going back to when I made my movie, I had a female director, and when I worked at the E Network, I had this woman, Franche, who was so fabulous. And there's an energy, and I believe that women, I've said this on the air a million times, women have to work harder to get respect. So they actually go, like in show business, they actually have to go to film school and then intern and then work their way up to become a director. Guys can bullshit their way through it and get away with a lot. And I don't understand this philosophy, especially guys who have daughters and sisters and mothers. What is the bias? I mean, what is it? They think a woman's going to be weak in the White House? Is that? I mean, I don't know how you combat that, honestly. I don't know what you say to those people.
Listen, I've been the first woman in almost every position I've had.
Yeah.
So I believe that men and women support women in leadership. And that's been my life experience. And that's why I'm running for president.
From the guy who used to have strippers on, lighting their farts. That he's come a long way.
It's just what he's saying is such common sense that it's like, if even someone like Howard Stern gets it, why is this not more obvious to the rest of mankind, And I mean specifically mankind, like, why is it so hard for so many men to get this? Even the guy, who was Fart Man gets it, Come on.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right. I forgot about Fart Man. Yeah. And I think it's also telling because when you look at the infamous early Trump media appearances when he was pushing his Playboy lifestyle, when he was on Howard Stern, he was bragging about how he walked into the dressing room of teenage girls changing clothes for his pageant and bragging about how he could get away with that. as if that was like some like master stroke, invading personal privacy.
No.
So I guess I have one question for you, and that's at this point in the election, I'm starting to feel like we're getting in the home stretch, but I am starting to get that feeling of like, okay, what else can I do as a white male? What would you recommend other white males do at this point that want to continue making an impact and want to continue helping elect Kamala?
I mean, I think right now getting on the phone and getting to the doors is incredibly important. And I think also that we are a certain kind of person and we are very politically aware, but in our larger social circles, there are many people who tend to vote, but don't know much before they vote. Even in Los Angeles, this is true. So it's, reaching out to those people and being like, your ballot came. Did you see your ballot? Do you have questions about the initiatives? Do you need to know where to drop off your ballot? Hey, I'll come by and get it for you if you can't. Reminding especially men, reminding men how important this is. Even in California, how deeply important this is. Because, there are people running for Congress on our ballot in very close races, and we need the presidency, but we need the Congress, or she can't get anything done. So
Mm,
making sure even in California, people are like, let's please vote is really, really important. And phone
Yeah.
banking's easy and phone banking's fun. So I always tell people to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
okay.
And LA is notorious for not voting.
Right.
It's
We're
people
terrible.
would be very surprised by how low the voting turnout is, and it works. And you'll appreciate this. One thing I've learned, it works both ways because so few people pay attention in LA that you can't bullshit the ones that do.
Mm,
They're not just going to get a mailer and be like, oh, that's it. They're going to read the newspaper, they're going to watch the debates, they're going to listen to the radio, they're going to get their information from everywhere. And it's not just going to be like one billboard saying no George Gasson and no on Laura Friedman, like you
Right.
got to try harder than that. And so it's, the Laura Friedman's opponent, his only strategy was to keep doing push polls. And so when you said that, like, I've never been called for a poll. Like I got called, I thought I was participating in a poll like 3 times, and I realized it was just him doing a push poll, which is where they like try to give you bad information about their opponent and try to like
Right.
sell you them. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not sure this is legal to
Right.
actually do it like this. But of course, election infractions are hardly enforced now. But to your point about it being important in California, one of there's a growing consensus, this isn't just me, but that the Trump campaign's strategy is, I think they know that they're not going to win. We don't know by how much, but they're looking ahead at the post-election day struggle to try to overturn whatever happens on election day. And seeing as how Trump has been blessed by judges bending over backwards and shredding their credibility for him before, he would, of course, be inclined to keep pursuing that strategy so that it doesn't get to January 6th where it's too late at the last minute for some cockamamie thing. So so when you see him having rallies in Coachella and in New York, there will be a new Congress that he has to rely on to hopefully pull strings for him. And so the amount of, it's not just voter suppression anymore. They've given up on trying to bring in more voters. He's never getting past 47% of the electorate, no matter how much he screams and hollers and uses the R word to describe Kamala. And so we have to really be on our game for what's going to happen after election day, presuming, as it would seem by now, that Kamala's going to be the winner of the election. But that doesn't mean, of course, if you've lived through 2000, that she's the one that ends up actually being sworn in. So,
Yes,
so these are
exactly.
the challenges that we have ahead. And so, so thank you very much, Sarah, for taking the time to talk to us today and sharing your insight and experience door knocking and politicking in this metropolitan area.
yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yes. And so we will try to do our part and push postcards and bug our social networks to do this.
Yes, but now that you have said the postcard word, which is great, Doors and phones are much more effective than postcards. So please, it's too late for postcards anyway. They're not going to get there on time. Doors and phones.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you very much. And just a reminder that we're doing this to fundraise for the Harris Walls campaign. So if you've appreciated what we've been doing these past 2.5 months, you can donate to secure.actblue.com/donate/white dudes. Thank you very much.